It's November 14th, 1942. The waters off Guadalcanal. Pitch black darkness. And somewhere in that darkness, two massive steel giants are hunting each other to the death. One of them is about to pull off the most devastating battleship versus battleship engagement in American naval history. The other won't survive the night. But here's the kicker. The ship that won this incredible victory? History barely remembers it. The brilliant admiral who made it possible? The Navy tried to forget him. And the revolutionary tactics that changed naval warfare forever? They were buried for decades. This is the story of the USS Washington, the most underrated American battleship of World War II. By late 1942, everyone knew battleships were finished. They were dinosaurs, relics of a bygone era. The future belonged to aircraft carriers, those floating airfields that could strike from hundreds of miles away. Pearl Harbor had proven it. The sinking of the Prince of Wales and Repulse had proven it. The Battle of the Coral Sea had proven it. Battleships? They were just expensive targets now. Slow, vulnerable, obsolete, or so the doctrine said. The USS Washington, commissioned in May 1941, was one of America's newest and most powerful battleships. 45,000 tons of American steel, 9 16-inch guns that could hurl a 1-ton shell over 20 miles. She was magnificent. She was powerful. And, according to the prevailing wisdom, she was already irrelevant. But Rear Admiral Willis Augustus Lee didn't buy it. Not completely. Lee was different from most naval officers of his generation. Sure, he was a graduate of the Naval Academy. Yes, he'd served on battleships his entire career. But Lee had something many of his peers lacked. He was a scientist at heart, a problem solver, an innovator who believed in the power of technology. Oh, and by the way, before the Navy, he'd won 5 gold medals at shooting at the 2020 Olympics. The man literally never missed. Lee understood that carriers had changed everything, but he also understood something the doctrine writers didn't. Battleships weren't obsolete. They just needed to evolve. And the key to that evolution was sitting in the Washington's radar room. The SG Surface Search Radar. To understand why this matters, you need to understand what naval combat looked like before radar. Imagine trying to fight another ship at night. You can't see them. They can't see you. You're basically sailing blind, hoping you spot the enemy's silhouette before they spot yours. Maybe you see muzzle flashes in the darkness and you shoot back in that general direction. Maybe you get lucky. Probably you don't. It was chaos. It was guesswork. It was terrifying. But radar could see in the dark. The SG radar could detect ships over 20 miles away and track them with precision. It was like having night vision goggles in a pitch-black knife fight. Lee didn't just want radar on his ships. He wanted to weaponize it. He developed custom fire control procedures that integrated the radar data directly into his gun aiming systems. He trained his crews relentlessly. He ran drill after drill after drill until reading radar returns and translating them into firing solutions became second nature. The Navy brass thought he was wasting time. Battleships weren't supposed to hunt in the dark. That's what destroyers and cruisers were for. Smaller, faster ships that could scout and screen. Battleships were supposed to slug it out in daylight, where you could see what you were shooting at. Lee was building something the Navy didn't think it needed. He was building a night-fighting battleship. Guadalcanal. If you wanted to pick the one place in 1942 where World War II hung in the balance, this was it. The Japanese held almost everything in the Pacific. The Americans had taken Guadalcanal, but barely, and the Japanese were determined to take it back. Night after night, Japanese warships would race down the slot, the channel between the Solomon Islands, to bombard American positions and land reinforcements. The waters around Guadalcanal became so filled with sunken ships, they called it Iron Bottom Sound. On November 14th, the Japanese were coming again. But this time, they were bringing the big guns. The battleship Kirishima, along with heavy cruisers and a screen of destroyers. Their mission, obliterate the American positions on Guadalcanal and cover a massive troop convoy. Admiral Lee was waiting for them, with Washington, the battleship South Dakota, and 4 destroyers. This was it. The ultimate test. Could a radar-equipped battleship actually work as a night-fighting predator? Lee was about to find out. The Japanese fleet entered the Sound just before midnight. Lee knew they were coming. His radar had picked them up miles away, but the Japanese had no idea the Americans were there. The American destroyers charged forward to engage, and all hell broke loose. In the darkness, ships fired at muzzle flashes, searchlights stabbed through the smoke. The Japanese destroyers and cruisers tore into the American destroyer screen with devastating accuracy. Within minutes, 3 of the 4 American destroyers were crippled or sinking. The 4th was limping away, on fire. Then the South Dakota, Washington's sister ship, made a critical electrical error. A circuit breaker tripped, and suddenly her radar went dead. Her gun directors went offline. She was blind, and she sailed right into the middle of the Japanese fleet. The Japanese couldn't believe their luck. Searchlights lit up the South Dakota like a stage performer under spotlights. Every Japanese ship in range opened fire. Shells slammed into her superstructure. Fires erupted. Men died. South Dakota absorbed hit after hit, her crew fighting desperately to keep her alive. The Japanese thought they'd won. They were so focused on killing South Dakota, they forgot to ask a crucial question. Where was the other battleship? 5 miles away, the USS Washington was watching everything. Lee's radar crew was tracking every ship in the Japanese fleet. They'd watched the destroyers get torn apart. They'd watched South Dakota stumble into the meat grinder. And Lee had held his fire, waiting, watching, calculating. Then his radar crew reported, "Battleship, range 8,400 yards, bearing steady. The Kirishima, Japan's pride, coming right towards them, still completely unaware that Washington existed." Lee gave the order, "Open fire." At 12:17 a.m., Washington's 9 16-inch guns roared to life. The first salvo hit, then another and another. Washington's guns were controlled by radar-directed fire control. Every shell was guided by mathematics, not guesswork. At a range of less than 5 miles, point blank for battleship combat, Washington was landing shell after shell on target. Kirishima never had a chance. She never even saw Washington. By the time she realized what was happening and tried to return fire, it was already over. In just 7 minutes, Washington fired 75 16-inch shells and dozens of 5-inch shells. 20 of the big ones hit home. Kirishima's superstructure was demolished. Her steering was wrecked. Fires raged out of control. She was dead in the water. The rest of the Japanese fleet fled. The troop convoy turned back. The bombardment mission was canceled. And the USS Washington? Not a single hit. Not a single combat casualty. She'd walked into a point-blank range gunfight against a battleship, multiple cruisers and destroyers, and come out without a scratch. It was the most underrated battleship engagement in American naval history. You'd think the Navy would have been ecstatic. You'd think they'd be studying what Lee did, learning from it, revolutionizing their tactics. You'd be wrong. The Navy brass minimized the victory. South Dakota, which had absorbed brutal punishment but survived, got most of the publicity. The press loved the story of the battle wagon that took a beating and kept fighting. Washington's precision execution? Less interesting, less desirable. More importantly, Lee's victory was inconvenient. It didn't fit the narrative. Carriers were the future. Battleships were obsolete. That was the doctrine. That was what billions of dollars and countless careers were built on. Acknowledging that a battleship could be a devastating offensive weapon in 1942, that maybe the Navy had been too hasty to sideline them, that was complicated. That raised questions. So they minimized it. Lee's innovations in radar-directed fire control and night-fighting tactics quietly shelved. His proposals for using battleships as radar-equipped hunter-tillers ignored. Lee kept fighting for his ideas. He kept training his crews. He kept innovating, but he was fighting against an institutional tide that had already decided battleships were yesterday's news.
Willis Lee died of a heart attack in August 1945, just days before Japan surrendered. He was 57 years old. His revolutionary ideas died with him, or so it seemed. Here's the thing about innovation. You can bury it, but you can't kill it. Everything Willis Lee pioneered, integrated sensors, radar-directed fire control, computer-assisted targeting, the idea that information dominance wins battles, that's the foundation of modern naval warfare. Today's Aegis combat systems, that's Lee's vision, perfected. Modern destroyers and cruisers using network sensors to track and engage threats they can't even see, that's exactly what Washington did to Hiroshima in 1942. The Navy eventually got there, but it took decades, and it cost lives in battles where Lee's tactics could have made the difference.
The tragedy isn't that the USS Washington was underrated. The tragedy is that the lessons of that November night in 1942 were ignored for a generation. Admiral Willis Lee saw the future of naval warfare before anyone else. He proved it worked, and he was forgotten. The USS Washington, she served with distinction through the rest of the war, never again got the chance to show what she could really do. She was scrapped in 1961. But that night off Guadalcanal, that was perfection. That was innovation, meeting preparation, meeting opportunity. That was the moment an obsolete battleship and a brilliant admiral changed naval warfare forever, even if no one wanted to admit it. The next time someone tells you something is obsolete, remember the USS Washington. Remember Admiral Willis Lee. Remember that innovation isn't about having the newest technology, it's about using the technology you have in ways no one else has imagined. And remember that sometimes the most important battles aren't the ones that get remembered. They're the ones that get forgotten. The USS Washington was the most underrated American battleship of World War II, and the ship that won the battle, the Navy, tried to forget.